I know this is going to sound odd, but just hear me out. On this episode, I'm sharing a personal story and connection between my plumber and public health. You're listening to the PHEC podcast, episode 375. The field of public health is so broad, overlapping multiple industries. With epidemiology at the core of public health, there are an unlimited number of ways to target specific populations, health conditions, environmental issues, and causes that matter most to you. My name is Dr. Huntley, and I'm the host here on the Public Health Epidemiology Conversations podcast. I'm an epidemiologist, consultant, and entrepreneur with over 20 years of experience in healthcare and public health. On this podcast, my guests and I engage in conversations that demonstrate the importance of public health and epidemiology across a variety of industries, helping you think outside the box and inspire greater positive impact in communities around the world. Now, let's dive into the topic of this brand new episode. Greetings, everyone, and thank you for joining me on this episode. I know you're curious about my introduction and mention of my plumber. I know it seems odd, but I really do think that you'll appreciate this story and my takeaways. But before I dive into the story, I want to take a moment and introduce myself to those who may be tuning in for the very first time. I lead a public health and epidemiology consulting firm that supports large nonprofit organizations and government agencies that serve BIPOC communities. We help our clients communicate their health data and information in plain language to their communities. If your organization serves BIPOC communities, please reach out to us through our website at DrCHHuntley.com, and we'd be happy to meet with you and just explore how we might be able to help support your organization. The links to our website will also be provided in the show notes and the description for this episode. Now, I'll share my plumber story with you. So this was, I can't remember exactly how long ago it was, maybe a couple of weeks ago, but I guess it's irrelevant in the context of the story. But my husband and I, it was on a weekend. I do know that. It was maybe a Saturday because I had just had some interest in, I mean, not exactly meal prep, but I wanted to cook a big batch of this one dish that I have. And then I wanted to be able to divide it up and then freeze it so that I would have this pre-cooked meal, like family-sized portions in the freezer for weekend gatherings. And I was just thinking ahead. So I was just in that mode of prepping and cooking, and I decided I was going to that's how I was going to spend the early part of my day. And my husband was getting into some college football. So here in the US, it's the beginning of football season and American football. So we're kind of deciding to do different things in the house. I had my projects I wanted to work on, which involved the kitchen, and then I was going to do some work upstairs, and he was going to hang out and watch college football, and just that was going to be our day. About halfway into my project, where I would say into the preparation of things, washing and prepping and mixing some things together, and just before it goes into the pressure cooker, I noticed that I had water leaking under my sink. I went into the sink to get something, and I noticed underneath was just soaked. So I began to pull things out, and I didn't know exactly where it was coming from, but everything underneath was soaked. So I was in a bit of a panic / instant anger because it was frustrating. I was in the middle of trying to do something, and then this is happening, and I'm just like beside myself. And plus it's a Saturday. So I'm thinking, this is a mess. And I started fussing from the kitchen, and my husband's like, well, what's going on? So I guess a little bit of a backstory here. He has an injury to his shoulder that involves nerve damage. So he is very limited in being able to, like, what he can do with moving his shoulder and his arm. So he was more frustrated because he couldn't climb underneath the sink, crawl under there and try to figure out what was going on. My next reaction was, well, it's Saturday. Let's just pay the surcharge and get a plumber out here to take care of this, because I knew I didn't want that sitting and being a mess. So I'll fast forward a little bit because we argued a little back and forth about what to do and what needed to be done. And I got attitude because I'm just frustrated. It's interrupting what I want to do. But he was just like, well, if I could figure out what it was, I could at least kind of pause the leaking problem and we could wait for our regular plumber. And I was like, well, there are other people, like, whatever the surcharge is, it's worth it, right? I want to pay and have this corrected and fixed. And, he's not a plumber professionally. So just kind of putting that out there. He's not exactly a handyman kind of guy. So I really didn't want him poking around in there anyway. Even if he did have mobility in his shoulder and could get down there, I didn't want him messing around with stuff. I wanted a professional to take care of it. So I know you're on my side. You feel me on this. So at any rate, he found a way to kind of rig things up. He found a bucket. He was able to figure out where it was leaking from. Like we have a double sink. So he figured out which side the leak was coming from. And we pulled everything out from underneath, dried all the water, and then he found a bucket that he put under that side. So I basically decided to use the more functional side of the sink. And we had that bucket under the side that had the leak, just in case something, water got down on that side, it would not flood underneath the sink anymore, the cabinet area. So that was our temporary fix. And he was adamant about waiting to call our regular plumber on Monday and not paying the extra charge for some other stranger to come out who may overcharge us, or he just didn't want to pay the surcharge when he, air quotes here, fixed the problem. So I let it go. I figured, okay, this is fine. It's not, it did temporarily solve the problem. I decided, I was able to finish what I was doing and let the rest of it go. So I went along with my day and he went back to his football, and that was that. Okay. So we went through the rest of the weekend with our, makeshift kitchen fix up. And I just decided that, okay, I wasn't going to do anything in there on Sunday because I didn't want to try to have to cook anything and have to maneuver around that anyway. I really enjoy cooking on the weekends, especially as we move into the fall. It's something about the fall weather, and I think about family meals, and I cook a lot, big portions and things that you can put into the Instapot. If you're familiar with that, it's like the pressure cooker and crock pot, slow cooker all together. So I like doing like one pot meals. And so I get into that mode. So I just decided I was not going to do any of that on Sunday because I had limitations in my kitchen and I didn't want to be frustrated. So we got through the weekend just fine. Monday rolled around. He called our regular plumber. Now, we've been in our house for a very long time, a lot of years. And we do have some service providers that we tend to stick with. You get to know people over time. And our plumber is one. I think we have used this plumber for many years, this plumbing company. And they will typically send out this one regular guy often. And sometimes they'll send somebody different, but we've got this kind of regular plumber that's, I guess we're probably in his area. So we get assigned to him often. Anyway, my husband called him on Monday, and just stick with me. I promise the story makes sense. So he called and they were not available to come on Monday. Usually if we call in the morning, they're able to come out the same day, but they were not available until Wednesday afternoon. So my husband's like, no problem. We'll wait. Again, I just stayed out of it. I didn't care that much, but I thought it was a little unusual because usually like if you wait that far, you wait through the weekend, you've gotten past the like higher charges, then why not just call somebody else who can get there a little bit faster? But he wanted to wait for the regular guy. And I really didn't want to push it. We had a temporary fix and it was still holding up. So a couple of more days to get somebody that we're familiar with. I was like, okay, that's fine. So Wednesday finally rolled around and our regular guy showed up. That day I was working for my home office. So I was in my office when he arrived, and I could tell just because I could hear the conversations. Well, mostly my husband talking, and every now and then the guy would say something. My husband's really chatty, and I think he was just really happy to have, somebody else in the house to talk to. And it wasn't our typical conversation. We've been dealing with some really heavy topics and everything's been really down, but they were just chatty about, just light conversation. They talked for quite a while. I heard the guy go out the front door, back in. I started to kind of laugh because my husband is a bit of a talker. As you know, I'm a podcaster with the mic. I do chat with you all a lot, but he's in general the extrovert. He never meets a stranger, that kind of guy. So he is really chatty. And so when the guy, at one point, he walks out to the truck, and I called my husband up and I was like, you have to just let him do what he's going to do. You're talking him up so much, and they're talking about aches and pains. And I hear my husband going into a lot of detail about what happened to him and his shoulder problems. And he's telling like the whole story. And then the guy's chiming in with, my wife went through something like that. And then there's back and forth. And I was just laughing. I said, he's not going to be able to get the work done. And I'm pretty sure they're charging us by the hour. And you're just talking him up. He can't get his work done. And my husband's like, no, he's getting it done while we're talking. I'm like, okay. I just letting you know he's got work to do. And I tease him a little bit about that. And The guy's going, I could hear him in and out because every time he goes out, the alarm goes off, the chimes to let me know the door is open and so forth. So after several back and forth trips, my husband did come back up to update me and say, okay, he's fixing it now. We need a new garbage disposal. It's like, okay. So all of that's been completed and I hear them talking about football. Now, at this point, I actually wanted to go get into the conversation because this guy, I know from the past, he likes a different football team. My husband and I like very different football teams. So we're opposing teams or arguing most of the time. And then this guy likes a different team from the two of us. So all three of us are always picking at each other during football season. Okay. So that's just, it matters. These details matter. So hang with me. I wanted to go downstairs and join the conversation because they're talking about football. And I wanted to kind of pick on this guy and his team. But I didn't because I had work to do. So I resisted that. And about a few minutes later, I hear him leave. So when I go downstairs a little bit later on for a break, I was talking to my husband about that. And I was teasing him a little bit, and then this is when the public health part starts to click. Okay. Because what I realized is I was like, okay, well, how much does this cost? Oh, and this is kind of an old school company. So they're just going to send us a bill. Like, you don't even know how much it costs. You didn't even question anything. But that was the beauty of it at the same time. My husband he acted like he'd just gotten a visit from an old friend. They were able to catch up and the friend had just left. And in the meantime, our kitchen sink leak problem was fixed, resolved, and everybody's on their way. So I got to thinking about that and I thought, what a great experience. And what a testament to how could we build relationships with our clients and our organizations, our communities, to where there's this level of trust and confidence and relationship established. So I really sat with this for a little while after I finished teasing my husband about chatting it up and all these things. In the real scope of things, I think there's a lot of good takeaways for us here. So here's what I learned. And this is what I want to share with you. After giving you all those kind of backstory details, you're wondering, where are we going with this? This is the part that I want. And I needed to share that story in order to really hammer this in because it hit me really hard all of a sudden. I thought, wow, this is really strong. And here's what I learned. First of all, trust. My husband trusted this company enough to wait for their availability. Like, we waited through our inconvenience and waited on this problem, not even knowing what was really causing the problem, but we waited through the weekend and then a few extra days for them to have time to send someone to fix our problem. That level of trust stood out to me. And then it leads into the confidence. So there's trust and then there's confidence. He not only trusted them to show up, but he was confident that they would take care of the problem. He never even considered calling another company to see if they were able to send someone else a little sooner. Yes, we got through the surcharge of a weekend call, but like on Monday, I'm sure he could have called some other company in the area who could have come the same day. He never considered that. He was confident in this particular company and the people that they send out that they would be able to take care of the problem. So he never considered that. And then you think about relationship. The relationship with this company, this particular plumbing company, was so strong that my husband never second guessed the diagnosis of needing a new garbage disposal. It was just like, oh, you need a new garbage disposal. Okay. He never asked any questions about the price. They had this casual conversation about their health problems and personal challenges and family. The guy's talking about his wife and how she's gone through the same thing that my husband had gone through. They chatted about football and, like I said, we like different teams. And even I was like wanting to get caught up in the conversation at that point. But what if we as public health professionals were more like this plumber? Or what if our organizations that we work for were more like the plumbing company toward the communities we serve? What would it feel like to truly build relationships with communities we serve in a way that had them responding to us in the way that my husband did with our plumber and plumbing company? What if the communities we serve trusted us enough to patiently wait for us to show up, knowing that we would? What if the communities we serve were confident enough in us to not consider outside sources for public health solutions? Like, what if our relationships with communities we serve were strong So strong that we regularly engaged in close conversations that allowed us to really get to know each other, with us knowing them and them knowing us. I challenge each of you to give this some thought and consider what you could do to help build more meaningful connections with communities you serve. I believe that's what is really meant by meaningful relationships, genuine relationships, value connections, and building community. It's this story. It's these examples of trust and confidence and true connections in relationships. And I'm taking this to heart. I've really implemented some changes for the better in my own organization. Now, I'm really proud of relationships that we have with our clients and communities that we serve through my organization. So this is not saying that you're not already doing this well. I just think that there's always room for improvement. We could do better. And I don't want you to feel like, well, I don't own a company or I'm not a boss and I can't make these decisions. It's not about that. It's every last one of us has the opportunity to play a role in building relationships and connections and trust and confidence. So ponder that for a little while and see what can be done. What can you take on? What can you implement within your wheelhouse? And just consider what things that you can do to build more meaningful connections within the communities that you serve. Now, completing my plumber story, I'd like for you to take a moment and share this episode with a friend, especially a public health friend and connection, colleague, classmate. I'm sure you know someone who would be interested in hearing this episode. If you're listening now in one of the podcast apps, you can easily share this episode through a text or directly to social media. And at the bottom of the show notes page, if you happen to be on our website, you'll find the social media sharing buttons, which make it super easy to share this episode with your network. All right, everyone. Until next time, have a fantastic rest of your day. Thank you for listening to the Public Health Epidemiology Conversations podcast. Visit phecpodcast.com to find the show notes for each episode and to learn how to work with me.